Well, I think they're just exciting musical performances. And I think when we take all the history and move it aside, I think one of the beauties of it is that now that we have been able to elevate the sound quality past what, again, Ralph Peer thought that there was such a low quality of recording that it could not translate as commercial music. That's why Bristol has become more of the birthplace of country music, is because they figured out the method to crystallize a very high quality recording. But now in the 21st century, to be able to have these earlier recordings presented in a much more high fidelity fashion, that's something that allows us to be able to see 2 years before. Because of course, Ernest Stoneman is a part of this recording session. Now, he's the guy who tips Ralph Peer to Bristol. So we're even seeing Bascom tips him to Asheville, and then Stoneman tips him to Bristol. So we're seeing the people that are making an effect on one session, leading to the next, and that we're looking at a full trajectory down the Appalachian Trailway to get to the next session, to show that there's even a path of discovery that's happening all along the way. And then, of course, just to kind of touch upon African American performers one more time, those barriers begin to break down. Even though the African American performers are not present in Asheville, they begin to have one in Bristol, and then by the time they have a second session in Bristol, Tarter and Gay, they begin to make recordings by 1928. Then in Nashville, D. Ford Bailey's making his first recordings. And then you have the Knoxville Sessions, where the Tennessee Chocolate Drops and Will Bennett begin to make recordings. And then the Johnson City Sessions, where you start to have Leola Manning, and you start to have all of these black jazz bands starting to appear. So the movement toward black performers being a part of these recording sessions is happening. But at the time, for 1925, this is still a time when segregation is so strict that that isn't a factor, because the sessions for black performers are being done still in the city centers of New York and in Chicago. And then also a lot of the innovative recordings have been made in the decade preceding 1925, leading into 1925, because of course, Louis Armstrong's made his great recordings. Mamie Smith, as I mentioned before, Ma Rainey, all of these performers are making recordings in different parts of the country in the years leading up to the Asheville Sessions. So when I was talking before about jazz singing, this is a reflection of what's been happening in the decade from 1920 to 1925. So the presence, while the performers themselves weren't a part of this specific session, the presence of African American musical form and culture are starting to build. And that's something that I think, if we think of it that way, just to be able to see old time music and mountain music as it was being presented at that time, I think this collection will be a real treasure trove for people that are longtime fans, and then for folks that are just interested for the first time, because I think it's very exciting music.